Hi, where are you from?
CNN.
All right, nice to see you. Adam, and you're with?
You know what I need to do?
All right, so you're C, N, and M.
There you go.
Yeah. All right, well, glad you're here.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
What angle is the best
See
of your
if
camera?
let's go out here and see if you can hear anything. Let's go out here and see if you can hear anything real quick. Turn the audio.
I'm guessing
I'm gonna go out of the
they may have a sign seating even, so we'll see.
How are you feeling about things?
I'm feeling good. And I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a challenge.
Yeah.
And you'd know if I were.
Yeah.
This isn't your first rodeo,
Not my
is it?
first rodeo, no.
Where do you live?
DC.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, then you're used to all of the schmoozing and all of the political posturing, all that stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah, but it's different up here.
Is
It's
it?
kind of, oh yeah. It's like a different, it's,
I
it's
guess
a lot more gentlemanly.
Yeah, I guess I
Sort of
know
old
that.
world,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, for one of us, that's about to change, I
Yeah,
guess.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We'll see.
How long
I don't know.
have
My
you
question is, do you even want to come to Washington?
Well, my answer is I don't.
Yeah.
And I'm not smiling when I say that.
Yeah.
I don't. But frankly, I look at the, no disparaging, I look at the other candidates and none of them represent the values of conservative South Dakotans.
Yeah, I know his work.
So if I don't go, we're stuck with
His
the
most famous line, if
So,
breakfast is the
that's-
most important
I get it.
meal of the day, because if
I get
you
it.
ain't home by breakfast, you're in trouble.
That's the line.
Yeah.
Joyce?
I'd rather sit over here because I'm a little
Well,
late.
that's where Rick and I are going to sit.
Oh, okay.
Unless you want to host
Hi,
the show.
Gordon Howie.
Hey, Gordon.
How are
Never
you?
met you before.
Yes, nice to
finally
see you.
meet
Hi, Larry. How are you?
the weather now. You take the first one,
Okay.
and I'll take second. Okay, he's playing the intro. Good afternoon, students, and welcome to a special class at Viewpoint University. Today we're going to be talking with 3 of the 4 U.S. Senate candidates. The 4th candidate declined to participate in this event, and so there's no empty chair, and we're not going to mention the 3 people that are here are the ones we're going to be talking to. Today we have former United States Senator Larry Pressler, Rick Weiland, and Gordon Howie, all of whom have been campaigning diligently over the past several months. When this race first started several months ago, it appeared to be a runaway. Now, depending upon what polls you want to believe and who's buying them and who's paying for them and what questions are being asked, arguably it's a pretty close race all the way around. Even the person that's polling in the single digits has strong support in certain areas and could determine the outcome of this race. So we welcome all 3 of you gentlemen to the forum today. We're not going to operate with a clock, so we're not going to start you and stop you. If I think you're going too long, I'll interrupt you. If I think you're going too long, I'll turn
You're
your
looking right
microphone.
at me when you
I
say
am,
that.
Lord, and I can do it with all 3 of you. We'll shut your microphone off and move on to the next team. So that's the way we're going to do it. We're not going to do opening statements. We will give each of you 60 seconds at the very end to do your own shameless promotion and commercial without interruption and without cost to any of you. So let's get started. Rick Noby along with Todd F. Dan Peters down in the control room taking care of business. Todd?
Start with Rick Weiland, the Democrat running for the U.S. Senate seat. Real simple question, and I'll ask each one of you. How many terms should a U.S. Senator serve?
Well, that's a good question. I would respond in 2 ways. One, I think when big money calls the shots in Washington and determines who ends up getting elected, we may perhaps need term limits. My hope is that if I'm fortunate enough to get the nod from the people of South Dakota, I'll introduce a constitutional amendment to get big money out of our politics, to establish a level playing field there so that incumbents aren't in an advantageous way. The problem with term limits, if all things are being equal, we've had some great leaders come out of South Dakota who've done a lot of good work for our state, saving our base, funding for projects like Lewis and Clark. And sometimes that kind of seniority works well for a state like South Dakota. But if I can't get big money out of politics and get my constitutional amendment passed, I would support term limits.
Larry, same question.
Well, I served 3 terms in the United States Senate already, and I was defeated at the end of 3 terms. I am now pledged to serve only 1 6-year term should I be sent back. And the reason for that is partially personal. I have 4 grandchildren around here who I want to get to at some point and spend more time with them. But I'm willing to serve 1 term in the Senate, and I can take my seniority back to the United States Senate. Also, I think it's important to recognize that United States Senators today spend 50% of their time raising money, either for their colleagues or for themselves over the next election. I would not have to raise a dime during my 6 years, so I can devote 100% of my time to serving the people of South Dakota. Also, I would not be angling for any other job or for any position and within the caucus or elsewhere. And by the way, the centrist group today has put out a statement that there may well be a centrist caucus in the coming Senate. But I could be a very effective member of that starting from day 1 because I can bring my seniority back and I don't have to learn the ropes. I know what to do when I get there. So I will serve, I'm pledged just to serve 1 6-year term.
Gordon, same question.
Well, as you know, South Dakota, the state legislature does have what we call term limits. Really, it's just a system by which you serve 8 years in one house, go to the other house, and then you bounce back and forth like a ping pong ball. So really, you could say, arguably, there aren't even term limits in South Dakota where we say we have term limits. I served in both of those chambers, but I only served 4 years in the House and 2 years in the state Senate. And I did that because I believe politics is never intended to be a career. It should be a calling. And that calling should call us to service, to God and country. I believe that what the problems we have in America today are because, not necessarily because of term limits, but because we have career politicians who want to continue to occupy the seats of authority and power. And frankly, it's one of the reasons I'm in this race, because I'm the only candidate who doesn't have decades of political involvement in one way or another. And America needs a new kind of leadership. We need leadership that brings principle back to politics instead of personality and instead of political expediency. So while I embrace term limits, I embrace it a little bit differently, because I think we should be called to serve and then called to go back home.
This is Viewpoint University on 1140 KSOO. We're talking with Larry Pressler, Rick Weiland, Gordon Howie, talking about the U.S. Senate election coming up on November 4th. Early voting is going on now, but the big election takes place in less than 3 weeks from today. So we hope you'll stay with us. This is VPU. Commercial breaks are about 3 minutes. So all right. I'll let you know.
I'm going to take some photos.
Are the ground rules that we can't mention Governor Lyons?
You can if you want to. I'm not going to.
Okay.
You guys can choose. You can do whatever you want.
I would like to just make an observation.
You can do that whenever.
A friendly observation.
You can do that when you've got your time, Senator. You can do what you want.
But then I'm going to talk about the debates. I think this is the 8th time we're the 3 musketeers here.
Yeah.
All three of you here.
We were given rules that we, quite good rules that we could only talk about certain issues and not mention anybody else.
Yeah.
Assume you're all adults
That's
and
what
not
I find.
behave in public.
I saw Jack was in charge of that, and Jack and I have pretty much the same style. He's even more strident than I am.
I would tell him that that was
Okay, here we go. Viewpoint University, today we are talking with the three of the four candidates for the United States Senate, Democrat Rick Weiland, Independent Gordon Howie, and Independent Larry Pressler. This race has now taken on some rather interesting national implications because depending on how this goes, might go the United States Senate. So there's a lot of interest in this race. As we continue the conversation, I just want to remind the three of you, A, we are on radio, and I know all of you, each one of you well enough to recognize your voices. Probably some of the people listening don't. So I will use your name at the beginning. If you want to use your name at the end of your comments, you're perfectly welcome to do that. Next question, former United States Senator Larry Pressler. More and more people qualify for the multitude of federal subsidies because they don't make enough money. In Sioux Falls, South Dakota, a single person working 40 hours a week needs to make $13.10 an hour to afford a modest one-bedroom apartment. The federal minimum wage is far below that. What is the federal role in commerce, job creation, and wages? Senator Pressler?
Well, first of all, I'm for raising the minimum wage to $9.50 an hour, which is below the amount that you said. But I really have a great deal of compassion. South Dakota has low wages. We have too low of pay for our teachers and for our newsmen, and we don't get investigative reporting in the state as a result of that. But throughout the state, whether somebody works in a bank or whatever, if they're on wages, they really struggle in South Dakota. And I'm doing a poetry reading tonight about one of my poems is about a prom queen. It's called Prom Queen, about a young South Dakota girl who finished high school in a small town and started a minimum wage job, got married, began to drink some and had some other problems, got a divorce, and she ended up 40 years old, an embittered person still on minimum wage. That's the problem, is people get locked into these minimum wage jobs, and we've got to do much better in South Dakota. And I am ashamed of the way we have ended up in Pine Ridge on our Native American reservation. I just got off the phone with Ingrid Onefeather, the wife of Gerald Onefeather, who was the chairman, the tribal chairman there, and I eulogized him down at Pine Ridge. We must do better in paying people, and our industries must realize that we shouldn't just be a cheap wage state, but also we must develop more jobs. If there are more jobs that pay a lot, now North Dakota wages are up, and so we also must have a flourishing economy to develop jobs and to help our Indian tribes become self-sustainable. So I'm for increasing the minimum wage and doing something about these people who live so close to the edge of poverty.
Gordon Howie, I won't read the whole preface of the question, but the question is, what is the federal role in commerce, job creation, and wages?
Well, I agree with my friend Larry on one thing. We should be ashamed, all right, but we should be ashamed of the pathetic job that Congress has done on both sides of the aisle with respect to the things that you're asking about. And as long as the subject of minimum wage has come up, I would say that I believe I'm the only candidate in this race who has openly suggested that I'm not in favor of raising the minimum wage. And I want to share just briefly with your listeners today why that is and why it impacts or how it impacts the economy. The challenge is how do you determine a living wage, and how do the dynamics of that work? We have failed in regard to maintaining the integrity of the United States dollar. And every time we raise the minimum wage, all we're really doing is kicking that problem down the road. And the problem is the deflating value of the dollar. If the Congress would simply take the initiative to stabilize our dollar, and they would do it very simply by restricting the amount of debt, controlling the amount of spending, and stop creating hundreds of millions of new dollars every day at the Federal Reserve, I mean, that would go a long way to solve all of the problems that we're talking about. But until we deal with that root problem, we can kick this minimum wage can down the street for the next 20 years and we'll still be facing the same issue. It'll just be higher, 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 because the dollar continues to go lower, lower, lower.
That was Gordon Howie. Rick Weiland, what is the federal role in commerce, job creation, and wages?
Well, first of all, I just start off by saying I was proud to be able to circulate the petition to put Prop 18 on the ballot. We're talking about giving people, another $1.25 an hour. 62,000 people in South Dakota will have a shot at maybe just a little bit better life. They're not going to be parking their money in offshore bank accounts to avoid paying taxes. They're going to spend that money. And another pair of shoes, some more food on the table, a roof over their heads. Those kinds of things help drive an economy, a consumer economy, which we have. And I think it goes a long way to solving a lot of our problems, including this deficit I think all of us are concerned about. That'll help with their payroll taxes to shore up Social Security and Medicare. So, I mean, I really think it's something we need to do. It's long overdue. And the fact that this particular initiative has a cost of living adjustment to it, it will be a fight we won't have to make every year. I also believe that the federal government has some basic responsibility to make sure that we've got an infrastructure that works for this country, and not just roads and bridges, but telecommunications. A huge role that they can play to make sure that when you're living out in Bottle, South Dakota, you got access to broadband, because you may be trying to do a business from your home kitchen table, and you need to have that kind of access. And I've talked about that in my campaign. I believe firmly in the whole concept of public-private partnerships, and we can't go it alone out here. Localities, county governments, cities can't go it alone. We're all in this together. And when you hear this constant berating of government at all levels, we need to work together at all levels in government to not only enhance commerce, but job creation. And this wage, I think, is a huge step in the right direction.
That was Rick Weiland. We're going to take another break. This is Viewpoint University Senate candidates Larry Pressler, Rick Weiland, and Gordon Howie with us until at least 5:30. We'll see how it goes beyond that, but I promise we won't interfere with the poetry reading later on this evening. This is Viewpoint University, KSOO. take it, then I'll give it to you. We continue our discussion with the three candidates for the United States Senate, Independents Gordon Howie and Larry Pressler, Democrat Rick Weiland. Next up, Todd F.
Gordon Howie, Independent, this is for you first. Medicaid and Medicare reimbursements are often not enough to cover the costs of the procedures. What is the federal government's role and responsibility to the providers so they don't lose money when treating those patients?
Well, you know, I think we have to start with where do you begin to draw a line in terms of how much money the federal government is going to spend, and how do you prioritize those issues? We could just sit here today and say, well, I think the federal government just ought to write the check, but we know it comes out of somebody's pocket. What has to happen in order to fundamentally change the way our entire government works is we have to put a lid on spending, we have to limit debt, and we have to reduce the size of government. And until we do that, until we put limits on our spending and on our debt, the people who serve in the House and the Senate will have no motivation to sit down and prioritize and deal with the real serious issues of the day. And until we begin to prioritize, there's just no limit to how much spending is required or how many subsidies we continue to expand. So rather than to just give you a direct answer to that question and say, well, we should just continue to escalate subsidies, I think it's a time in our nation where nobody has to tell us we're in serious trouble. And unless we develop a new leadership style, we're not going to solve those problems. And we won't be able to fund any of those programs if we are a bankrupt nation. We have to begin with fiscal sanity, and we need to compel men and women who serve in our Congress to sit down at the table and know that they have limits that force them to prioritize. And we'll have to make some hard choices, but at that time I think we'll be able to make some progress.
Okay, thank you. Rick Weiland, Democratic candidate for Senate.
Well, you know, I think part of the problem with this sort of medical inflation has been driven for years by the fact there were so many people in this country who didn't have health insurance. Now, with the Affordable Care Act, some of them got covered, but not all of them. And here in South Dakota, we decided, the state legislature and this governor, not to include 48,000 people in the Medicaid expansion, leaving $272 million on the table every year. You want to talk about boosting your economy and taking care of rural access and rural health care. That would have gone a long way, not only to improving the economy, but covering those people that desperately need coverage. I've come out very early with a bill to expand Medicare, which is, of course, the insurance program for people that are 65 years or older. By opening up Medicare, not as the only option, but as another option, instead of just big private insurance, I believe what happens is all those people that the private insurance companies were going after they were willing to give up the pre-existing condition denial, and the lifetime cap was lifted, was to get access to those 50-some million Americans who now have to buy their product. I say give them access to Medicare or big insurance, let them choose. It'll bring down the cost of insurance, we'll have more universal coverage and less money being shifted, which is what happens when you have people who don't have health insurance. They go into the emergency rooms, they get care, and the doctors and the hospitals shift them to the people who are paying their insurance, back to the county levels of government. And that's one way I think you can address this. There is so much money in health care, from the doctors to the hospitals to the pharmaceutical companies to the medical suppliers. We still haven't gotten what we need. And I go back to one premise of my entire campaign, is because big money's still calling the shots when it comes to health care in this country.
Second question, Larry Pressler, Independent.
Yes, I support the Affordable Care Act. Earlier this summer in South Dakota, the state Republican Party adopted a resolution to impeach President Obama, and I objected very much. I even sent a letter to President Obama inviting him to South Dakota so we could work on improving the Affordable Care Act so that people who have medical bills outstanding will get help. It has been my approach to work with both sides. I contributed financially to Mitt Romney, and I also co-hosted a fundraiser for him, although I voted for Barack Obama for veterans reasons. But the point is, Obamacare would have been called Romneycare had Romney won the presidency. And then all the Republicans would be for it and all the Democrats would be against it. But that's part of the reason I'm running for the United States Senate as an independent, because our political debate about medicine has reached a point where it's by which party, which idea it came from. I will take the best ideas from both parties. Today, the centrist group issued a statement that it appears that there will be 4 independent senators in the new United States Senate. There are 2 there now, one coming from Kansas, myself. And they suggested that with Senator Collins, a moderate from Maine, and maybe Senator Kirk or one others, a centrist caucus could be formed. And this would break the poisonous dialogue. So we may be on something very historic happening in South Dakota by voting for Larry Pressler, independent for the U.S. Senate.
Gentlemen, for the next segment, we're going to let you choose what you want to talk about. I'm going to hand you a sheet of paper. You pick 2 of them to talk about. And whatever 2 you want to do, you can do. And we'll do that in the next segment. The subject matters will be the budget, foreign policy, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, education, and agriculture. And I'll hand you the sheet. You pick whatever 2 you want to do, and when we come back, we'll let you wax eloquently on whichever 2 you want to talk about in the next segment. This is Viewpoint University, 1140 KSOO. University Boardroom, second floor at Town Square Media in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. 3 guests with us today. Each one of these gentlemen wants your vote November 4th to become the next United States Senator from the state of South Dakota. We have with us Democrat Rick Weiland, Independents Larry Pressler, and Gordon Howie. Gentlemen, before the break, I handed each of you a sheet of paper with some that you get to choose which 2 items you want to talk about. Budget, foreign policy, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, education, and agriculture. We're going to give each of you about 2 minutes on both of these subject matters, and I realize you could go on and on, but we wanted you to choose the things that you wanted to talk about, at least in this particular segment. First up, Democrat Rick Weiland.
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about Medicare and Social Security, but in the context on some of this, in terms of the Ryan budget, which is the Republican budget that's been proposed. Paul Ryan wants to essentially pass a budget that would cut taxes for millionaires and big corporations to the tune of about $6 trillion over the course of the next 10 years. You know, we're in an era of sort of fiscal austerity and responsibility. It just doesn't mesh with the needs of this country right now to be looking at budget cuts at the top end, or tax cuts at the top end, and going after the budget on programs like Pell Grants and Medicare and Medicaid. Medicare, in particular, in that budget, it's been proposed to try to voucherize it, turn it into a coupon program. You know, I'm a strong proponent of Medicare. I think it has provided health security for hundreds of millions of our fellow citizens in this country. That's why I want to make it stronger by opening it up to everybody else. 97 cents on the dollar, Rick, goes to pay for health care costs, not administrative costs. On the private big insurance side, that's upwards to 17%. That's going to pay big, fat CEO salaries. We need to protect Medicare. I think by expanding and allowing people to come in is going to give us a healthcare system where insurance, whether it's big private insurance or government insurance, is more affordable. Number 2, on Social Security, I was just with Tom Harkin this morning. Harkin's had a bill for over a year and a half now that essentially would do 2 things. 1, over a period of time, it would raise the cap off of Social Security. Right now, people in this country, after $117,000, don't pay any more payroll taxes. Now, if you take the cap off, you can create more solvency in Social Security, and according to Harkin's numbers, and I trust them, you can actually give people who rely on Social Security as their only means of retirement security another $65 a month. So we need Social Security. We know well in this state how important it is to literally 150,000 people. And we can do a better job with Medicare by opening up for folks who are healthy, who aren't going to access the health care, but they're going to pay the premium.
That was Rick Weiland. Senator Pressler, budget, foreign policy, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, education, or agriculture?
Well, I'll start with Social Security. I'm a champion of Social Security. There are a lot of very false ads being run against me on Social Security, and I do not have enough money to respond because I do not take special interest money. My whole campaign has only got about 1% as much money in it, or about $300,000, compared to millions on the part of the Republican and the Democrat. But I did announce today that Special Agent Good, the director of the Abscan operation in the FBI many years ago, has volunteered to come to South Dakota to campaign for me. I didn't even know who this fellow was a year ago, but there was a movie called American Hustle, and he was a consultant on it because he was the assistant to the director of the FBI when the Abscan thing came, where I was recognized for turning down a bribe. I've never thought that was a big deal. In terms that the average South Dakotan would do the exact same thing. But Agent Good is coming to speak on my behalf and spend a couple of days going around the state with me, because he wants to speak out against the corruption and special interests of all the money. And both, whether we send the Republican nominee or the Democratic nominee to Washington, they will be cloaked in special interest money. My campaign has only about 1% as much money, so it's hard for me to strike back. And it's going to be hard for me to answer these mailings. One mailing that people got said, well, I'm a friend of Mitt Romney, therefore, and I gave money to Romney. Another one said, I voted for Obama. Well, I'm an independent. I can vote for whomever I please and who I feel. But I do think it's very important that we clean up the corruption in Washington, which is special interest money.
That was Larry Pressler. Gordon Howie, budget, foreign policy, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, education, and agriculture. Take
Well,
that, too.
well, there isn't a bad subject
I know.
that we should talk about, but I think I would start with budget and foreign policy. I suspect, though, I'm probably not going to get beyond budget before you tell me my time's up. I think what you need to do is look at the records of the candidates who are running. When you talk about the budget, I think it's fair to say most conservatives in South Dakota would believe if you voted twice for Barack Obama, you just don't qualify as a conservative. I believe that tells you something about your fiscal policies, as you just can't vote for the same guy the second term if you disagreed with him the first term. And our budget is arguably out of control. Then you go to the Republican nominee, who has a record of nearly doubling the state budget. He increased taxes, left us with a $127 million deficit, and not to mention a scandal or two that stink like high heaven. But the real issue about budget is that we have to send men and women who will be fiscally responsible. We need to return political honesty to the halls of Congress. And we need senators who will stand up and be a voice for reason. And that voice for reason has to say we must cut spending, we must reduce debt, and we have to stop government growth. We will simply never get that done if we send more of the same. And more of the same, frankly, it's easy to determine by looking in the rearview mirror.
You're right. You went too long.
Now for my next subject.
No. I got to stop you at that one. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to explore these issues in a little bit more depth and maybe take a side trip or two along the way. This is Viewpoint University with Todd Epp and Dan Peters, our guests today. Independents candidates for the United States Senate, Larry Pressler, Gordon Howie, and Rick Weiland. This is VPU. Senate race, which started off to be kind of a yawner for a lot of people, maybe even including some of the candidates, has now turned into quite a horse race, and it's statistically extremely close for 3 out of the 4, and the 4th is holding really solid, and that could determine at least the fate of one of the other candidates, depending upon how solid that support remains. Gentlemen, in the last segment, we let you choose a couple of topics that you wanted to talk about. This time, we're going to do it. Foreign policy is primarily the purview of the President of the United States, I think, and yet there is a Senate Foreign Relations Committee which has some input and impact on that. I want to spend some time talking about the Middle East, ISIS, ISIL, and our country's either reaction or lack of reaction to what's going on in the Middle East. Senator Pressler, we're going to go with you, not because you served in the United States Senate, but because you're next in line in the questioning order here. If you are sent to the United States Senate and would have some influence on foreign policy, particularly Middle Eastern foreign policy, where do you want to take us?
All right, well, first of all, I served on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and I am a combat veteran from Vietnam, and as such I'm sort of unusual in that I'm opposed to our getting involved in all these foreign civil wars. I want to spend more of the money here at home on education, Social Security, and so forth. So therefore, I would not have supported the second part of the resolution of the President of going into Syria. I don't agree with President Obama on a lot of things, and I've said so. But as a combat veteran, I'm sort of unusual in that I believe we wasted our time in Vietnam, where I served. We did the same thing again in Iraq, and we did the same thing in Afghanistan in terms of American blood and treasure. I'm of a generation where I have observed that, and I'm the only veteran running for the Senate, and I volunteered to serve because I believe Lyndon Johnson and what he was saying. But I've come to the conclusion that we should be very firm. We should take airstrikes, and some airstrikes. I believe in the Powell Doctrine, where you go in and strike quickly and get out. But I don't want to see it enmeshed with boots on the ground again. There should be a new era, and one of the votes that I will seek in the Senate before I join a caucus is a fundamental change in foreign policy, where we will relocate some of our obsolete bases in Italy. I taught as a Fulbright professor from South Dakota, but I was in Italy, and there are 44 obsolete military installations there from World War II. We should relocate them to the United States, put them on our southern border, where they could secure the border at no additional expense.
Senator Larry Pressler, Gordon Howie, if you were sent to the United States Senate, where do you want to lead us as it relates to foreign policy, specifically in the Middle East?
Well, I think before you go to the Middle East, you have to do job number one, and that has to be to secure the homeland. If we don't have a secure border and we send our resources abroad and continue to allow hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants to come across our border, they're undocumented, we don't know who they are, we don't know what their mission is, we don't know where they're going, and to think that those people do not include folks from the terrorist organizations that want to destroy us, we're kidding ourselves. And it's not that we lack the resources. It's not that we aren't a great enough nation to secure our own homeland. It's that we lack the political will. The reason we lack the political will is we haven't sent the right men and women to Congress, and we haven't held the president accountable. With regard to dealing with ISIS and the terrorism threats around the world, again, our president has been too little, too late. And it's wonderful to talk about the Powell Doctrine and say, well, we want to strike quickly and get out. You have to go in and do the job. And the only way you're going to do the job, which means that you exterminate these folks that want to destroy us, the only way you're going to accomplish that is to listen to the men and women in our military. We have incredible military intelligence. Unfortunately, we have a president who summarily dismisses it and would rather be on the third green than in the Oval Office to deal with these significant issues.
That's Gordon Howie. Rick Weiland, if you were sent to the United States Senate, foreign policy in the Middle East, where do you want to lead us?
Well, first of all, I'm just going to comment on the incredible military intelligence. I'm not sure we had it when we got into Iraq. I look at ISIS as a threat, no question about it, and I do believe we need to degrade and ultimately destroy their capability over there. But I don't support a go-it-alone strategy, a unilateral effort on behalf of the United States. We need an international community effort, a coalition that will come together and bring assets and resources, military assets and resources to bear. This isn't just the United States problem. This is that region's problem. It's a world problem, and we need to deal with it in that way. I would not have voted to arm the Syrian rebels. We armed Osama bin Laden during that war over there where they were taking on the Soviet Union, and I guess the enemy of the enemy is my friend, but 20 years later he turns around and turns those resources, those military assets against the United States. So I really am troubled by that and would not have voted for it. I will not support boots on the ground. I just don't believe the United States should be committing our sons and daughters to another Middle Eastern war. And I also think that the airstrike campaign that's currently underway, I hope it's successful. I want to support the president in terms of his efforts to create this international coalition. I hope he is as successful as George Herbert Walker Bush was in the Persian Gulf War, because it was not a go-it-alone strategy back then. A number of nations came to the table with military assets. They had a clear mission. They got in and they got out. That's what we need to do right now.
Talking with Rick Weiland, Larry Pressler, and Gordon Howie. These men are seeking your vote for the United States Senate on November 4th. We're going to take a break for commercials and news. When we come back in the next segment, we're going to talk about what bill you want to have your name on, your first action as a United States Senator. We're going to spend a little time about campaign tactics, both yours and others. And we're going to talk about pheasants, and there is a rational tie-in with that. We'll be back. This is Viewpoint University, KSOO. Welcome to our third segment of Viewpoint University. Today we are pleased to have with us independent candidates Larry Pressler and Gordon Howie and Democrat Rick Weiland. They are asking for your vote today or tomorrow or between now and Election Day, November 4th. Early voting is going on in the state, so at any particular time you choose to go to the polls, you can do that, but the main election day, November 4th. This question it's not intended, I'm not intended to bypass you, Rick Weiland, but since we have two independents sitting here, I need to focus in on them for just a moment. Don't worry, we'll get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Gordon Howie, if you are elected to the United States Senate, you have run as an independent, although most of your career you have been a Republican. A, you think you'll switch back and be a Republican if you're elected? And B, if you choose not to, where are you going to caucus?
Well, I'm not going to switch back to anything because I've never left the Republican Party. There are two people who claim to be Republicans in this race. I'm running as an independent. The other one has put the con in conservative, and I put the serve in conservative. That's the significant difference. We're talking about ideologies that talk really out of one side of the mouth and then the other side of the mouth versus a new style of leadership, and that's what I bring, that talks straight to people, even when it means I don't tell them what they want to hear. So, am I running as an independent? Yes, but I'm a conservative. I can't imagine why the Republicans wouldn't clamor to have me in their caucus, because I represent everything that they say in their platform. And that's where my heart and mind would take me.
Okay, Senator Pressler, you have been a lifelong Republican. You recently changed to become an independent. You've talked about that independence. You've talked about the caucusing. If you're elected to the Senate, who are you going to caucus with?
Well, I will very carefully make that decision based on where I can get votes on fundamental issues such as veterans and senior citizens and reducing the budgetary deficit. What is happening in Congress now is nothing. They passed no budgetary resolutions. I have spoken to Angus King of Maine, an independent. There are presently 2 independents in the United States Senate. There well may be 4. And the centrist group today issued a call that there be a centrist caucus. So there may well be a change in American politics, because people are so tired of the fighting, the poisonous fighting between Republicans and Democrats, that they want something different. But I would either join the independent caucus, or I would carefully consult as to what votes, because I want to get something done. I'm only going to be there for 1 term. I want to legislate. So, and let me remind you that South Dakota may be a major part of history if they elect Larry Pressler as an independent to the Senate, because we're in a situation that the deadlock, the poisonous deadlock between the 2 parties needs to be broken, and people are tired of it, they're fed up, and so am I, and that's why I ran as an independent.
Rick Weiland, the question is obvious, and I think the answer is obvious, but if you're elected to the United States Senate, where are you going to caucus?
You know, I think you need to keep at the forefront of all this when you get there, not who you're going to caucus with. I've been out there over 500 some community visits, over 200 and some public meetings, looking voters in the eye, sharing with them what I want to do, listening to them, Rick, in terms of what they want. And they want someone who's going to go out there and fight on their behalf. I could fight on their behalf within the confines of the Democratic caucus. They're my number one concern. My number one purpose for being in this race is not to be in the Democratic caucus, but to go to Washington, D.C. and fight on behalf of middle-class families and folks who want a fair shake from their government, and they're not getting it because big money's taking it from them.
Okay, we're going to stay with us for just a couple more moments here, Dan. We're not going to break at this particular point. Senator Pressler, and this goes to all 3 of you, defining moments in the United States Senate, or when you put your name on that first bill. For a lot of people, that becomes an identification of who you are and what you're all about, now that the campaign rhetoric is over and the campaign bills are either paid or not paid. So the question to you, and Senator Pressler, we'll start with you. You're in the United States Senate. You've been sworn in. You're ready to go. What is your name going to go on first?
Well, it would probably be a veterans bill. And it's been raised here that I voted for Barack Obama twice, but it was for reasons of helping veterans. The first time, Barack Obama made a wonderful pledge on reforming the veterans hospitals. And I'm a combat veteran of Vietnam, and I was part of the Vietnam Veterans Group that foresaw a problem in the veterans hospitals, and we wanted a change, and President Obama pledged to that. Then we were disappointed because he didn't follow through on that reform, and we did, many of us did go to Mitt Romney in 2011, but he refused to make a major speech or to make a commitment, and Obama again made a strong commitment. So my reason for voting for Barack Obama are fairly conservative reasons to help veterans. I am a veteran. I'm the only veteran in this race, and I seem to be criticized for that. And I've stood strongly for veterans, so I will try to put my name on a veterans bill, particularly related to post-traumatic stress disorder, but also to the returning veterans who have served our country so well. And many years ago, out at our farm at Humboldt, South Dakota, I had a Rhodes Scholarship, so I could take a student deferment. My dad said to me, if you do that, somebody poorer than you will have to go, and that may bother you the rest of your life. So I volunteered, and I served 2 tours of combat duty in Vietnam, and that is why I voted for Barack Obama. It may well be that I'll support Mitt Romney in the future, but he did not come through for us on that.
Okay, Rick Weiland, your first bill, what is it?
It's on my website, right, but it's also on the back of my business card. It says that, so the votes of all rather than the wealth of the few shall direct the course of this republic. Congress shall have the power to limit the raising and spending of money with respect to federal elections. I believe that we have got to take our government back from big money special interests. It's gotten in the way of good health care reform. It was the big insurance companies that killed a Medicare choice type option. It's gotten in the way of a good agricultural policy. Our farm bills are still beholden to big corporate agriculture at the expense of the average scale farmer. It's gotten in the way of our Veterans Administration and the funding they needed early on in order to take care of the veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. It's gotten in the way of good tax policy. We've got corporations like General Electric that love to park their profits offshore to avoid paying taxes. $69 billion they made between 2008 and 2012. They paid 0 in taxes, and they got a $3.6 billion tax refund. That's just not right. And we're paying for it. The middle class is paying for it. There's no we're stagnating here in South Dakota. The middle class isn't getting ahead because big money has stolen their government. That's the reason I'm running. That's the reason I'm in this race, and I think it's the reason I'm going to win.
Gordon Howie, your first bill, what is it?
The direction I want to go with the first piece of legislation would be something that would cut spending, that would limit the federal debt. I mean, put an actual limit on it and stop government growth. But more than that, I think it's important that we look at what direction you'd go with legislation, because it's easy in a political season to make promises and put posters on the wall that says, here are the 3, 4, 10, 20 things that I'll do to introduce legislation. You need to look at the history of every candidate and see where they've been, what they've done. And frankly, my history has been very solidly to support conservative, traditional values. And I will align myself with senators like Senator Cruz rather than senators like Mitch McConnell. I think that, frankly, Mitch McConnell and Harry Reid are both part of the problem. And it's time we replace them both. I heard Larry Pressler talking about this impeachment resolution. I don't think it goes far enough. Getting rid of President Obama isn't enough. We have to move on to replace Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi, and Mitch McConnell and John Boehner. The Republicans and the Democrats in leadership are complicit in taking this country in the wrong direction, and new leadership will take it in the right direction.
That was Gordon Howie. We're going to take a break and be back. We've got one more major question, and then we're going to give you gentlemen a chance at your closing statements. We hope you'll stay with us. This is BPU.
Okay.
Viewpoint University, Rick Noby along with Todd Epp and Dan Peters, our guests today are former United States Senator Larry Pressler, independent candidate for the U.S. Senate, Rick Weiland, Democrat candidate for the U.S. Senate, and Gordon Howie, independent candidate for the United States Senate. And we now give the final question to these gentlemen over to Todd.
Gentlemen, one of the things about South Dakota that reason people will live here and maybe not get paid as much as they could elsewhere is they love the outdoors and all the activities we have, hunting, fishing, and so forth. In particular, hunting is an important part of the economy. It brings in people. We're going to have pheasant hunters coming into Sioux Falls from all over the world on Saturday. It's a big part of tourism. There's agricultural components involved with hunting. Small towns depend on the hunters coming in, not just Sioux Falls, but Gregory and so forth. And so it's important to many aspects of South Dakota life. Numbers of pheasants in South Dakota have been down. What can the federal government do, and what would you do as a senator to help increase the number of pheasants and hunting opportunities in South Dakota? And we'll start with Rick.
Well, actually, I'm looking forward to hunting on Sunday. Going to be hunting with some of your colleagues, I hope, at Dick Nemec's farm near Hollenberg. You know, this is where I think this government partnership works for a state like South Dakota. I know there are folks that just would like the federal government to basically shut down, and they did, by the way, last October. They did shut it down. They'd like it to go away. But when you have programs for conservation, CRP, for example, which has really helped produce a pheasant population here, which has brought hunters, as Todd said, from all over the country that want to come here and take advantage of this wonderful state and the habitat that we have. We need a partnership. And CRP, which is a great government program, has created that kind of partnership that's given us an income based on the land outside of just farming for corn and feeding off and growing livestock. So I really believe that we need to continue to look for ways to work together between the federal, state, and local governments to make sure that the habitat stays healthy. I mean, there are provisions right now where people want to basically farm again from fence row to fence row and dig up those prairie potholes, which serve as an attraction to wildlife and waterfowl. And I think we better be very careful about that. But it's a conversation we have, and it shouldn't be just top down. It needs to be both ways. And I think if you've got someone out in Washington that gets both sides of this, we can find that common ground and continue to create the habitat and the income that we're getting from people coming from out of the state to shoot our pheasants and enjoy the outdoors.
Larry Pressler, independent. What are you going to do for the pheasants?
Well, I'm going to hunt some of them this weekend, but I wanted to clear up one thing. There's an ad running on television saying I am for stricter gun control laws and that I should be defeated. I am for a background check, which we Republicans passed in the United States Senate in the 1990s. And I would say that almost every pheasant hunter in South Dakota is for that background check so that people with some mental problems can't be shooting children in schools. And that's a very mild position, but I mention that because at this moment there's probably 10 ads running on television criticizing me, saying that I'm for stricter gun. As a matter of fact, Mike Brown's, and I wish Mike Brown's were here, I would confront him about this. He's running the ad, it's his ad, and he approves it at the end. That it says Larry Pressler is for stricter gun control. And is he against this background check that all Republicans in the United States Senate supported in the 1990s? I don't think so. And let me add to that I wish Governor Rounds were here because we've now had 8 debates without him. There's been we've gone 2 months without him. But he's running negative ads against me directly, and they're deceitful and they are lies. And one of them is that I'm for stricter gun control. I am not. And I wish I would say the same thing if he were here. Mike, take down those ads. They are lies and saying that I'm for stricter gun control. What is your position on a background check? then? Because I'm sure you're for it, and what would you say to these school children who have been shot? So we have to, all hunters in South Dakota, I would say, most hunters are for that.
Gordon Howie, independent.
Well, back to the pheasant part of your question, I just would suggest that it's so typical of every issue across the board. We hear people running for office who want to say that government somehow is the solution. And I want to suggest that I believe private enterprise and capitalism have always been the best way to go. When we're talking about pheasants, my wife and I live on a farm ranch that we own and operate. I am hands-on agriculture. I understand this stuff. And we just, you better get that, Larry, I think it's probably Barack.
No, it was Mike Rounds, wasn't it?
Taking
It was
that
Mitt
as-
Romney.
Okay, let's get back to the subject matter. Gordon Howie, keep going.
You know, my wife and I, 6 or 8 years ago, planted 40,000 trees on our property. 40,000. We did it because we believe in conservation. We did it because we wanted to develop wildlife habitat. I took a break from this campaign to go home and release pheasants on our ranch, and I didn't do it to hunt them. I did it because I am a lover of wildlife. I'm a conservationist. And I have been in state government enough to know that even state government is adversarial to landowners who are the custodians of our wildlife. And it's time that we get government the heck out of that part of our business. We need to reward people who are conservationists and wildlife-minded and true environmentalists. And the way you do that is you simply let them do what they love to do. And I love wildlife.
This is Viewpoint University. We're going to take one more short break. We're going to be back. Closing statements by Rick Weiland, Larry Pressler, and Gordon Howie. This is KSOO. And Dan Peters, we've been pleased to have with us today Rick Weiland, Democrat, Larry Pressler, Independent, and Gordon Howie, Independent candidates for the United States Senate. We're now coming to the closing comments. During one of the commercial interludes, we did the obligatory drawing of lots and allowed people to pick when they wanted to speak. Gordon Howie is first. Mr. Howie, you've got 60 seconds, closing statement.
Thank you very much. I'm appreciative of that. Rick, South Dakota conservatives have a very clear choice in this race. They can choose between fear or new leadership. Mike Rounds is promoting this idea that the only way to change Congress is to elect him and save the world from Harry Reid. But I believe the way to save the world is through new leadership, not through someone who's grown government, not through someone who has produced an EB5 scandal that stinks more every day, and now not from someone who just took a bogus Tea Party endorsement from a fake Tea Party group. And it's not from someone who, as governor, has a secret scandal about sexual abuse. And I would just suggest that it's time people looked at what happened in the Meddy rape case and what Mike Rounds did to remove the rights of sexual abuse victims when he was governor.
That was Gordon Howie. Next up, former United States Senator Larry Pressler. 60 seconds, sir.
Thank you very much for sponsoring this debate. I apologize, my cell phone went off. I jokingly said that was Mitt Romney thanking me for my contribution and asking me for another one. But on a serious matter, I also should thank Senator Harkin, who said some very kind things about me in his visit to Sioux Falls, as has been reported in the media. I am a champion of senior citizens. There are massive ads running saying I voted to cut Social Security back in the 80s. Those were budgetary tabling motions that did not cut Social Security. I'm for increasing Social Security. I'd like to tie the COLA to the price of food, and I want to ask citizens for a sense of fairness. I do not have enough money to put up ads to answer those massive ads saying that I voted to cut Social Security and that I was against Medicare and so forth. They are false ads, deceitful, and I do not have enough money to answer them directly, so I'll do it right now. They are wrong.
That was former United States Senator Larry Pressler. Democrat Rick Weiland, you've got the final 60 seconds, starting now.
We need to take our country back. We really do. We need to take it back from big money special interests and get it back on the side of everyday folks again. It needs to be a government that's of, for, and by the people. I've traveled to all those towns. I'm doing my second tour. People want a fair shake. They need an honest referee. And they feel we've lost our way, and I agree with them. That's why I'm running. We need to reform the tax code so that millionaires and big corporations pay their fair share. The average corporation in this country, big corporation, pays a tax rate of about 17%. They've got a tax code that allows them to park money offshore to avoid paying taxes. We need to invest in our country again, in roads and bridges, and in education, in affordable student loans, in Head Start, and we need to get at this debt. If we get money out of our politics, we can get public policy that's working for everyday folks again. We need to invest in the people, we need to unrig this system, and we need to get our country back on track.
That was Rick Weiland. This is Viewpoint University. Gentlemen, and on behalf of the people listening today, I want to thank you. Rick, nice to see you. Thank you very much
Always
for
good to see you.
90 minutes with us. Larry Pressler, former United States Senator, it's always a pleasure to be in your presence, sir. Thank you. And Gordon Howie, thank you very much for making the long drive from western South Dakota to be
We
with
were
us.
here working the voters.
I would hope so. I would hope so. That concludes this section of Viewpoint University. When we come back after the break, Todd and I are going to talk. We're going to invite your phone calls about what you heard or didn't hear from these three gentlemen, and that'll be your chance to participate in this discussion. This is Viewpoint University, KSOO.